we tend to measure art in specific units. Some countries, that's meters, some it's feet. In this case, it's about 3/4 of a hanks. Moving on. The Madonna of the Rocks was executed shortly after Leonardo moves to Milan. Now, this is not unusual. He's, of course, there for a different project, but it's not unusual for an artist to be asked, hey, can you do this other thing for us? And was done for the Chapel of the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception in San Francisco Grande. The work builds on Masaccio's understanding of chiaroscuro, the subtle play of light and dark. And here it's particularly subtle. In fact, what he's trying to do is actually show the ether, as he puts it. He's trying to show the stuff that's between the rest of the stuff, which is part of the reason that this painting takes on its own sort of brown tone, or its own tone overall. In terms of composition, the figures are laid out in a pyramidal form. Why? Well, a pyramid is a very stable shape. We understand it that way as humanity. And this is the basis of a religion. It is foundational. After all, we have Mary, Jesus, and St. John, as well as Elizabeth. These four characters lay out the foundation of Christianity as we know it today. So it makes sense that he's going to use this very stable form of the pyramidal composition. More notably, they share the same environment, as a uniform representation of objects in an atmospheric setting. What makes them uniform is that tonality. He's got this element of sort of a brownish tone that runs throughout the whole thing. Whether it's in the sky or in the flesh tone, it's always there. It's very, very subtle. If it were much stronger, it would stand out and it would be disturbing, but because it's very, very subtle, it seems to work. The figures seem to emerge through nuances of light and shade from the dark, almost cavernous visionary landscape. His effective use of atmospheric perspective is the result of his mastery of the new medium of oil paint, which had previously been used by Northern European painters and was slowly making its way south. Now, Leonardo was in Milan at the time, so that's why he's getting his hands on early. Most of the paintings that we've seen in Florence, for example, are not oils. They're either fresco or they're tempera, which is a egg-based paint that dries in about 20 minutes or so, meaning that blending is very difficult. But with oils, you have days, weeks, or sometimes months to blend and work with the paint. The actions of the figures relate in such a way as to further unite the work. What do I mean by this? Well, when we look at Mary, we follow not her gaze, because her gaze is actually down towards Jesus in this direction, but we follow her arm. Her arm comes down to Elizabeth, her sister, and Elizabeth points us across to this figure, the child who's actually praying to another child who's giving a sign of benediction, which means this is probably this is John and Jesus. But Leonardo is basically moving us through the image. The first thing we're going to go to is ultimately Mary's head. The reason we're going to go there is because this is the point of the greatest contrast, that skin tone versus look at all of the dark surrounding her form. This is just a big giant dark hole in the canvas filled by her face. So it's the first thing we're going to look at. And then we're either going to head for Jesus or we're going to head for Elizabeth and move throughout the piece. Leonardo's taking a lot of time to work out these details and items. This is all very intentional. By creating an emotionally compelling, visually unified, and spatially convincing image, Leonardo has succeeded in expressing the intention of his soul, which is a fancy way of saying he's done a really phenomenal job creating a unified work where the composition, the colors, the use of perspective all come together to create something that is incredibly enticing, inviting the viewer into it as if we could interact with the Holy Family.